Good evening.
Hi.
So what questions do we have this evening?
Well,
I
I'll
did,
start. I guess if no
okay.
one else wants to.
Yeah, so I did get
Um,
that email from Kelly in case she doesn't remember all the questions. I can answer those a little bit later.
do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, I got three different things I was going to ask you about. The first one is I know the topic's going to be discussed in the September meeting, but it's about the cottage food law. I ended up getting in touch with this guy named John Strauss, and he works at the Colorado Department of Health, the State Manufactured Foods Program. Because I had read the act, done a lot of stuff. He clarified for me exactly what we need as backyard people, as long as you're selling less than 10,000. So I'm really clear now what I need. But I mentioned to him that we're going to be talking about it at our next meeting, and he said that he couldn't make it to the September meeting. I didn't even know he would travel, but he said he has inspections out here on the Western Slope that he would go to, but when he found out that we occasionally have Zoom, he said if we're interested, he'd be happy to talk to the Bee Club on Zoom on our next meeting. So I said
Okay.
I'd present it to the board, let them know I've got his phone number if you guys want to talk to him. But he's the point of contact here in Colorado. He's the smart guy.
Yeah, that'll work. I mean, we can definitely do that.
Okay. You want his
But,
number?
yeah, let me grab something to write down here real quick. I mean, Tracy was the one who brought it up at our last board meeting. It's a little weird that, usually we schedule the board meeting for the fourth Thursday of the month, and we do this on the fourth Wednesday. So usually the board meeting's after this, but because of how the calendar was this year, the board meeting was before the Q&A. So that's what brought that up. But let's go
Yeah.
ahead and let me get that information from you. So you said his name was John?
John, Jon. And
Okay.
last name is Strauss, Strauss.
Okay.
And his number is 720-456-8641.
Okay.
He's
Yeah,
a
I will.
real nice guy, real friendly, just eager to be of help. So, I mean, he could probably make it to our October meeting, he said, but I told him we're talking about it in September. So he said, be happy to do that on Zoom if you guys are interested.
Yeah, let me get with the rest of the board and find out. I mean, October is normally our honey tasting,
Yeah,
so I mean we could do that as well with that.
yeah,
So
yeah. I think it's good that we're getting it done now because I suspect that the majority of the people in the club are not in compliance with the law in Colorado just because, we didn't know about it.
yeah,
So,
that was a discussion we had at the board meeting. Is most of the people are not in compliance, and it's not been that big of a deal because nobody's gotten sick. But as soon as the first
right.
incident happens, then the gates of hell open and everything's going to change. So we figured we'd get ahead of it before that
Yeah.
happened.
Well, based on what he said, this is a real easy fix if you're doing less than 10,000 and you're not selling as a wholesaler. If you're selling a couple of pints to friends, neighbors, and people on the internet, then it's not a big deal. There are very few things that actually have to be done to make it in compliance with the cottage food law.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that'll get discussed later.
Yeah, and it's a lot more complicated if we're doing, you're doing something like baked goods where you have to put all
Right.
the ingredients down. But the biggest thing is, that we were discussing is make sure that, honey is very, very bold, or you have to make sure you put on their ingredients and contains honey. I
Yeah,
always got a kick
right.
out of that. It's carrots, it contains carrots. It's honey, it contains honey.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I agree.
So, and then the
Um,
labeling with your name and phone number is a big deal too. So,
yeah, right. Okay, and also net weight on there. You got to
yep.
put the net weight. Yeah. There's a couple other things, but anyway, I'm sure it'll get discussed. And then I got a question for you. Just when are you going to do your last harvest?
I'm going to try to harvest this coming weekend, is what I'm going to
Okay.
do. And then, um, I'll probably put supers back on just to see what they do with it. And
Yeah,
then probably, depending on what they're doing, probably the end of September would be my last to let them build up. I mean, since I send my bees with uh, Jason to California, my winter buildup's a little less important than for everybody who keeps them here in the valley.
yeah, yeah. Okay, good. I was gonna do something very similar. And then when are you gonna start 2-for-1 feeding?
It depends on. I usually don't feed in the winter. If they got enough nectar, I usually don't feed in the winter.
Oh,
And
okay.
that was one of the questions that Kelly had, was asking about winter feeding. If they're light, you want to feed them. You want to get that 80 pounds in your hives. I would say, right around the beginning of October, because October is weird. It could be warm and we could still have flowers and they could be good, or we could get that early cold snap that frosts everything and shuts everything down. So
Yeah, I did candy boards last year and that worked really well, but I can't remember when I set out the 2-for-1 to, to encourage them to build up more, but I'll probably start that around October, but I'm gonna do candy
yeah,
boards too. Okay, and
I
then the
would
last thing
just I would
I'm
say I
sorry, go
wouldn't
ahead.
put it. I wouldn't put your sugar water on until you're done with honey, because you don't want them just to
Right,
basically make sugar honey, because then what's
right.
the point? So
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I say October, but I'll be done I'll have my supers off by then. And the last thing, I was just gonna throw this out to see if the board would be interested. Um, I know we've got a vapor machine that we loan out. Is there a chance that the board would want to buy one of those 2-lift carriers? Have you seen those? You put
yeah,
you can move a whole beehive, two guys. It's like a V shape almost, and the hive sits
yeah.
in the middle, and it doesn't get lopsided. Two people can carry it easily. It takes the weight off of it, and it remains stable, and you move it across the yard. I don't know how frequently it'd be used, but I'm going to get. I'm full disclosure. I'm going to be needing one, and I just didn't want to spend $100 for something I'm only going to need one time. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's something that the board would want to buy for the club, and then we loan that out too. It's just an idea.
Let's bring it up at the full meeting and see what interest there has, to take a vote
Okay.
on it. That's what we can do with that. So yeah, I've been looking into a lifter too, but the one I want is a little fancier. It can lift the whole hive with the supers and everything, and one person can do it. It's kind of like a dolly, but it can raise up and down. But that's $1,500. So
Yeah, I've seen those. Really nice, really nice. And there's no strain on the person at all.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, those are the three things I was going to ask about. So anybody else
okay.
wants to? Thanks.
Yep. So did anybody else have any questions, or I can start reading off the questions and trying to answer what Kelly sent in earlier? Okay, well, so the questions from the email, one of them was about the sugar water, which we just answered. She also asked about putting pollen patties on for the winter. You don't want to put pollen patties on in the winter, because that's for when the bees are building up. That's the protein. So you want to save that till spring, when they actually start building their numbers back up. You don't want to get them building numbers up in the winter and then not have enough food, and then causing them to starve. Um, let's see, how long is it safe to leave the honey supers on? You can leave them on forever. I mean, the first year I did bees, I didn't get enough to actually harvest, so I left my supers on all winter long. It kind of gave them some extra food, but they can basically stay on there forever. So they will start getting, as it cools down, they will start getting thick, and it might start to crystallize. So you might have some problems then. But as far as I know, most people in the valley are pulling their supers off by the end of September at the latest. So the next question was, squash on the farm next to me is still blooming. Will the bees still keep going to that, or will they start going after the rabbit brush? Usually a bee will go after one type of flower. So if they're already going after the squash, then they'll keep going after the squash until it's done. And then once they exhaust that nectar source, that's when they'll start finding something else. So looks like Jason just jumped in on here. So if I'm answering anything wrong, hop in and let me know. Let's see. It says when we pull honey supers, what do we do with the frames that are not fully capped and the honey is still running? The best bet on that is to do that test where you pull it out and kind of hold it over the hive and shake it. And if it's dripping out, then it's way too wet. Just leave those frames, give them back. If it's not dripping out, then you can go ahead and extract it. And then a good thing would be to have a refractometer when you're done to see about where you're at. You can always, leave honey out a little bit to dry because we're so dry around here, it'll decrease it. Or if it's too dry, you can add little tiny bits of distilled water to get it, right around that 15 to 19% range. And then let's see, it says if we have a single deep that due to a split a month or two ago, what steps should we do to keep them alive this winter? So that one is, you basically want to get them as much weight as you can on those girls so they have enough storage for the winter. So that's where you might start feeding your sugar water. I guess the question would be, is your super that you're adding, or your next double deep that you're adding, does it have drawn comb on it already, or is it, do you have to draw it out? Because that could make a difference. So I'm not sure what's anybody else's opinion about building up a low one. Because I got the same thing. I've got one that was a swarm, and when I just checked them this weekend, they decided to requeen themselves, and they're only a half a box right now. So I hope they can get that new queen and get built back up and ready to rock and roll for winter. So I was hoping for some other opinions.
You don't have to worry about being overly heavy at this point. You don't want to be honey bound. So just make sure you got enough room for them to put up honey. And then when it gets closer to the end of October, that's when you want to check your weight. Middle of October, if you're light, you can start feeding, but there is so much coming in right now in the valley. Rabbit brush is starting. A lot of the sunflowers, natural forage, the fall forage is taking place. So if they need it, that's always the axiom. You can put feed out. If they need it, they'll take it. If they're got natural nectar coming in, then they won't touch it. So, but the last thing you want to do is plug your nest, because they need room to lay the next generation. So if you're if you're getting honey bound, then that's a worse problem right now than being too light.
Yeah, her question was she had done a split basically, and they're still in a single, and what to make sure they to do for getting ready for winter in that single.
Oh, well, you can overwinter in a single if they're heavy enough. We don't usually run out of our winters aren't that cold where you're going to have issues with not enough food, and then you can emergency feed in the spring if you need to. But I know a lot of guys that overwinter in a single. The reason why we don't is just the volume of bees. You get a lot more bees in the double deep than you can, which can be a two-edged sword, because the more bees you have to feed them, they take more feed. But if you overwinter in a single, you have a slower start in the spring because your numbers are going to be down. But I mean, there's people that do that. It all depends on, I guess, the bees. If your Carnolians are slower build up in the spring, but they don't take as many stores. So it depends on If you're running Italians, Russians, or Cornolians, or Caucasians, they're all a little bit different in their genetics and what they're doing. But like I said, this time of year, just make sure they got room, and if they're in a single, ready to go to a double, throw that second on top and try to get them to draw out some comb before you still have one good month of forage, good natural forage. This time of year, most of the farmers on this next cutting, they let that last field of alfalfa bloom, and they let it bloom for at least a week and a half, sometimes 2 weeks. Some of the guys even more. I've seen fields that are in bloom that have been in bloom now for 3 weeks, and so they're doing well for the alfalfa. And then again, the rabbit brush is just starting, and you'll have another 2 weeks of that, at least 2, sometimes 3, depends on temperatures and weather. Curly cup gumweed is happening too, and all my bees are working the curly cup gumweed, which produces a lot of good fall nectar.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Doug, I have a question after everybody leaves. It's not about bees. It's about the meeting room and stuff. So when everybody signs off, I need to talk to you about that.
Okay, that'll work. I mean, if there's no other questions for tonight, I think we can go ahead and end the meeting.
That's quick.
All right.
Yeah, well, we'd started a little bit before, and if you, both Tracy and Jason can hang on, I got some things to talk about that Ralph brought up before you guys jumped on.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yep, we'll see you guys at the next meeting.
All right. We'll see you. Thank you.